The city's skyline was bleeding gold and lavender through the panoramic glass walls of the top floor revolving restaurant, the last gasp of autumn sunlight setting the crystal chandeliers ablaze. Every table bore a centerpiece of custom-bred champagne roses, pale blush blooms that had cost me a small fortune, and 3 months of negotiations with a boutique florist. The cutlery was gilded, the champagne flutes etched with our initials, and the 30 long tables had been arranged so that every guest could watch the sunset over the river bend. I had booked the entire observatory hall for this night, our 7th wedding anniversary, and I had done it with the kind of meticulous, almost obsessive care that only a man still deeply in love could muster. My name is Leo Shen. I am 34 years old, and I own 3 boutique interior design studios that I built from a single desk in a cramped rented room. For 7 years, I had poured every ounce of my energy into those businesses, not for my own glory, but to give Ivy the life she deserved. I handed her full access to our joint accounts, transferred properties into both our names, and never once questioned her spending. She had the freedom to buy whatever she wanted: designer handbags, limited edition watches, seasonal couture, and I took quiet pride in seeing her happy. But that was only half of it. I also took on every domestic burden, every tedious chore, every emotional negotiation with our extended families. I handled her mother's monthly medical appointments, the blood pressure checks, the rheumatology consultations, the endless pharmacy runs. I accompanied my own father to his post-bypass rehabilitation sessions. I paid the utility bills, arranged the cleaning service, managed the intricate web of social obligations that came with our circle of friends and colleagues. Ivy never had to lift a finger. I wanted it that way. I wanted her to feel safe, cocooned, cherished. And for the most part, I believed she did. Our friends often teased me for being the perfect husband, and I would laugh it off, secretly pleased. But beneath that polished exterior, I carried a wound that never fully healed, a thorn that had been lodged in my chest since the early days of our marriage. That thorn was Ethan Jiang. Ethan was Ivy's so-called best male friend, a title I had grown to despise over the years. He was a freelance photographer with a rakish smile and an insatiable appetite for attention, always floating through parties and gallery openings, always angling for the spotlight. He had known Ivy for 10 years, 3 years longer than I had, and he never missed an opportunity to remind me of that fact. He was charming in a slippery way, the kind of man who could make a woman feel like the center of the universe while simultaneously undermining her husband's authority with a well-placed joke. From the very start, I had tried to set gentle boundaries. I told Ivy, as diplomatically as I could, that I was uncomfortable with how often Ethan texted her late at night, how he would drop by our apartment unannounced, how they would take weekend trips together without inviting me. Each time, she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand and a sharp rebuttal. "Leo, can you please be more open-minded? Ethan and I have been friends for a decade. He's like family to me. You're being paranoid." Family was the word she used most often, and I, desperate to be the understanding husband, would swallow my jealousy and apologize for being narrow-minded. I told myself that their bond was purely platonic, that Ivy would never betray me, that my fears were unfounded. I convinced myself that love meant trust, and trust meant giving her the benefit of the doubt, even when that doubt gnawed at my insides like acid. Over the years, I watched Ethan insert himself into every corner of our life. He was there at our engagement party, taking candid shots that he later framed for her. He was there at our wedding, standing just a little too close during the first dance. He was there on our first anniversary, when he, coincidentally, booked a table at the same restaurant. He would call her at midnight to vent about his latest romantic disaster, and she would sit on the living room couch, her voice soft and reassuring, while I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her laugh at something he had said. I tried to be the bigger man. I invited Ethan to family dinners, bought him Christmas gifts, even offered to help him find better studio space. I thought that if I showed him kindness, he would reciprocate by backing off. Instead, he took my generosity as a green light to push further. He would pull Ivy aside at gatherings, whispering in her ear, and I would catch snippets of their conversation. "Leo just doesn't get you. You're wasting your creative energy on someone so mundane. If you were with someone who really understood your soul." Ivy would nod along, never defending me, never telling him to stop. The breaking point came, as these things always do, at the worst possible moment. The anniversary banquet was supposed to be perfect. I had spent 3 months planning every detail: the menu, the seating arrangement, the live string quartet, the custom-printed menus with a handwritten note from me on the back. I had ordered a special vintage of champagne that Ivy had mentioned loving during our honeymoon in Provence. I had even commissioned a small oil painting of the two of us, based on a photograph from our 3rd anniversary, to be unveiled during the toast. The evening began beautifully. Ivy looked ravishing in a champagne-colored mermaid gown that hugged her curves and shimmered under the lights. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her diamond earrings, my gift from last Christmas, caught the glint of the chandeliers. She smiled as she took my arm, and for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that all my efforts had been worth it. We greeted the guests together. My parents, who had flown in from the suburbs, her parents, both beaming with pride, our closest friends from college, my business partners and their spouses. The atmosphere was warm, convivial, full of laughter and clinking glasses. I felt a swell of affection for Ivy as she charmed everyone with her easy grace. But my eyes kept drifting to the corner of the room where Ethan had stationed himself. He was wearing a crisp white linen blazer, too casual for the occasion, but he always dressed to stand out. He nursed a glass of whiskey and watched Ivy with an intensity that made my stomach clench. Throughout the cocktail hour, he found excuses to approach her, to compliment her dress, to adjust a strand of hair that had fallen loose, to lean in and whisper something that made her laugh. Each time, I bit my tongue and forced a smile. When it was time for my speech, I stepped up to the podium with a practiced calm. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. The words I wanted to say, the tone I wanted to strike, the balance between public devotion and private intimacy. I began by thanking our families for their support, then turned to Ivy, my voice thick with emotion. "Ivy, for 7 years, you have been the center of my world. I have tried to give you everything you deserve: comfort, freedom, love. And I hope that in the years to come, we can continue to build this life together with mutual respect and understanding." I paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Part of that respect, I think, is knowing when to set boundaries with the people outside our marriage. It's not about jealousy, it's about cherishing what we have and protecting it from anything that might dilute it." I had meant the words to be gentle, a quiet reminder rather than an accusation. But the moment they left my lips, I saw Ethan's face contort with rage. He set down his whiskey glass with a loud clunk and rose to his feet, his voice cutting through the string quartet like a blade. "Leo, what the hell is that supposed to mean?" He strode toward the stage, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. "Are you seriously going to use your anniversary speech to take a cheap shot at me? Ivy and I have been friends for 10 years. We're pure, and you know it. But you can't stop insinuating that there's something dirty going on. It's pathetic." The room went deathly silent. The quartet stopped mid-phrase. Every pair of eyes, dozens of them, turned toward us, some wide with shock, others gleaming with morbid curiosity. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, partly from embarrassment, partly from a slow-building anger that I had suppressed for far too long. "Ethan, this is between Ivy and me," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled. "I'm asking my wife to consider the boundaries that make a marriage healthy. You're an outsider. You don't have a say in this." "Outsider?" He laughed, a bitter, brittle sound. "I've known Ivy since before you even met her. I was there when she was struggling with her career, when she was lonely, when she needed someone to listen. You just showed up with your money and your fancy apartments, and you think that gives you the right to dictate who she can be close to. You don't deserve her, Leo. You never did." He was on the stage now, standing beside Ivy, and to my horror, he draped an arm around her shoulder with a possessive familiarity that made my blood boil. Ivy didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned ever so slightly toward him, a micro-movement, barely perceptible, but I saw it. I felt it like a physical blow. My mother, seated in the front row, had tears streaming down her face. My father gripped the edge of his chair, his knuckles white. "Jealousy?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "I'm asking for basic respect, for a husband to matter more than a friend. Is that too much to ask?" "You're making a mountain out of a molehill," she shot back, her tone dismissive. "Ethan is my best friend. I'm not going to choose between you two. That's ridiculous." Ethan, emboldened by her support, took a step toward me, his chest puffed out. "You hear that, Leo? She's not choosing. She's never going to choose. Because she knows I'm the one who actually understands her. You're just the provider, the bankroll. Without your money, you'd be nothing to her." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I had spent 7 years swallowing insults, tamping down my pride, convincing myself that love required patience and forgiveness. But this public humiliation, this blatant usurping of my place, was more than I could bear. I reached out and gently pushed Ethan's arm away from Ivy's shoulder. I didn't shove him, I didn't strike him. I simply moved his hand, as if to say, "This is my wife, and you do not touch her." The gesture was mild, almost apologetic, but Ivy reacted as if I had thrown a punch. Her eyes blazed with righteous fury. She drew back her hand and swung it forward with a force that I had never seen in her before. The slap landed square on my left cheek, a sharp, stinging crack that reverberated through the silent hall. The pain was immediate and searing. My head snapped to the side, and for a moment my vision blurred. I tasted blood where my teeth had cut my inner cheek. My ear rang with a high-pitched whine, but worse than the physical sting was the wave of disbelief that crashed over me. She had hit me, in front of everyone, our parents, our friends, our colleagues, the hotel staff. She had struck me like I was a stranger, a threat, an enemy. And she had done it to protect Ethan. The room was utterly still. I could hear my mother's choked sob, the rustle of Ivy's mother trying to stand, the hushed whispers that rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. I slowly raised my hand to my cheek, my fingers trembling as they traced the hot, raised welt that was already forming. Ivy, still shielding Ethan with her body, glared at me with a ferocity I had never seen. "You don't touch him, Leo. You don't get to put your hands on him, ever. He's the most important person in my life, and if you can't accept that, then maybe you don't deserve me at all." Behind her, Ethan wore a smirk of undisguised triumph. He patted her shoulder with mock comfort, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He had achieved exactly what he wanted, a public rupture, a final break, a demonstration that Ivy would always choose him over me. I looked at Ivy, really looked at her, and I felt the last ember of my love flicker and die. This was not the woman I had married. This was not the gentle, compassionate soul I had given my heart to. This was a stranger who valued a manipulative narcissist above the husband who had sacrificed everything for her. "You slapped me," I said, my voice quiet but steady, "in front of our families, on our anniversary, for pushing away a man who has been trying to destroy our marriage for years." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. 7 years, Ivy. 7 years of paying for your mother's medical bills, caring for your father, handling every domestic detail so you could live a life of ease. 7 years of biting my tongue while Ethan wormed his way into every private moment. And this is what I get, a public slap because I dared to defend our marriage. She opened her mouth to retort, but I didn't give her the chance. "You chose him," I continued, my voice flat and hollow. "You've always chosen him, and tonight you made it unmistakably clear. So I'm done. I'm done trying to compete, done being the bigger man, done watching you put a friend above a husband. This marriage is over." I turned and walked off the stage, leaving the microphone lying on the floor. I didn't look back at the sea of shocked faces, didn't pause to hear my mother's pleas or Ivy's father's angry whispers. I walked straight down the corridor toward the private lounge, my footsteps echoing off the marble walls, my cheek throbbing with every heartbeat. The lounge was dark and quiet, a refuge from the chaos. I pressed my back against the cold wall and closed my eyes, letting the silence wash over me. The autumn breeze from the ventilation grate brushed against my burning skin, and I focused on the sensation, the sharp coolness that contrasted with the heat of my humiliation. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I had taken earlier that evening, the rose centerpieces, the champagne tower, the handwritten place cards. Every image was a testament to the care I had poured into this night, a night that had turned into a nightmare. I swiped further through older photos, our honeymoon in the south of France, Ivy laughing on a sun-drenched terrace. Our 3rd anniversary, when I had surprised her with a weekend in Tuscany, the day we brought our first puppy home, now long gone. Each memory felt like a betrayal. I dialed my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Claire, who had handled my business contracts for years. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Leo? It's late. Are you all right?" "I need you to draft a divorce agreement," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Full financial disclosure, fair division of assets, no vengeful clauses. Just a clean break. I'll send you the details tomorrow." There was a pause on her end. "Leo, what happened?" I told her the bare bones of the evening, the speech, the interruption, the slap. I didn't embellish or lament, I simply stated facts. When I finished, Claire said, "I'm sorry, that sounds devastating, but if this is what you want, I'll have a draft ready by the end of the week. Are you sure about the asset split? You're being more than generous." "I'm sure," I said. "I don't want to fight, I just want out." I ended the call and stood there in the dim light, letting the gravity of what I had done settle over me. Divorce. The word had always seemed abstract, something that happened to other people. But now it was real, inescapable. After a long while, I heard footsteps approaching. Mrs. Sue, Ivy's mother, appeared in the doorway, her face etched with worry and sorrow. She walked toward me slowly, as if afraid I might shatter. "Leo, my dear boy," she said, her voice trembling. "I am so sorry. I never thought Ivy would. I don't know what came over her. That man, Ethan, he's poisoned her mind. She doesn't see what she's doing. Please, don't make any hasty decisions. Give her a chance to apologize, to make amends." I shook my head, a sad smile touching my lips. "Mrs. Sue, I appreciate your kindness, but this isn't a hasty decision. This is the result of 7 years of slow erosion. The slap was just the final blow. Even without Ethan's scheming, Ivy has never made me feel like a priority. She's always chosen him, always dismissed my concerns. I can't live like that anymore. But she was confused. She didn't see his true nature. Mrs. Sue started. Whether or not she saw it, she chose to defend him over me, in front of everyone, I said, my voice gentle but firm. That's not something I can forget, and it's not something I can forgive. I've already contacted my lawyer. The process will be handled properly. Please don't try to change my mind. Mrs. Sue's eyes filled with tears. She reached out as if to touch my cheek, then withdrew her hand. You've been such a good son-in-law, Leo. I'll never forget everything you've done for our family. If there's anything I can do. Just take care of Ivy, I said. She'll need you. I walked past her toward the elevator, my steps measured and deliberate. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrored walls, the red mark on my cheek vivid against my pale skin. I touched it again, wincing at the tenderness. 7 years of devotion, reduced to this. The elevator descended to the parking garage, and I walked to my car, a dark sedan that smelled of leather and old coffee. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, before I started the engine and drove away from the building, away from the anniversary that had become a tomb. Back in the now empty banquet hall, Ivy lay crumpled on the cold marble floor, her champagne gown pooling around her like a discarded curtain. Her phone lay beside her, its screen fractured into a spiderweb of cracks. She had regained consciousness only minutes ago, but her body still trembled with the aftershock of what she had discovered. Mrs. Sue knelt beside her, stroking her hair, her own face wet with tears. Ivy, sweetheart, please, try to sit up. You're scaring me. Ivy's eyes were fixed on the broken phone. The text message that had caused her collapse was still visible on the cracked display. Ethan's smug, revelatory words burned into her retina. Ivy, that slap was perfect. I engineered everything tonight, the confrontation, the drama, all to push Leo over the edge. He'll never understand you like I do. Once you're divorced, we can be together openly. I've already booked an apartment for us. We don't have to hide anymore. Shas? The words swam before her eyes, each syllable a fresh wound. She had read them 3 times now, and each reading peeled away another layer of her self-deception. He planned it all, she whispered, her voice hoarse. He wanted me to hit Leo. He wanted to destroy us. And I fell for it. I fell for every single lie. Mrs. Sue sighed, a heavy, weary sound. I've warned you so many times, Ivy. That man was never your friend. He was a predator. But you wouldn't listen. You kept defending him, kept pushing Leo away, and now look what's happened. Ivy's breath came in ragged gasps. The enormity of her mistake crashed down on her like a tidal wave. She remembered every time Leo had tried to talk to her about boundaries, his gentle, almost pleading tone, the hurt in his eyes when she dismissed him. She remembered the way he would stay up late, waiting for her to come home from Ethan's, the way he would prepare her favorite snacks, the way he would kiss her forehead before going to work. She had taken all of it for granted, convinced that she was being loyal to a true friend. But Ethan had never been a friend. He had been a long-con artist, slowly and meticulously eroding her marriage, positioning himself as the sympathetic confidant, while subtly poisoning her against Leo. Every late-night call, every emergency visit, every carefully phrased critique of Leo's personality, they were all part of a strategy. Leo is gone, isn't he? Ivy's voice broke on the name. He left. He's not coming back. Mrs. Sue nodded grimly. He said he's already called his lawyer. He's talking about divorce, Ivy. And from the look in his eyes, I don't think he's bluffing. The word divorce hit Ivy like a physical blow. She clutched her chest, a sob tearing from her throat. No, I can't. I have to fix this. I have to make him understand. I didn't mean to hurt him. I was just so angry, and Ethan was there, and She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the dizziness that threatened to topple her. She grabbed her backup phone from her bag and dialed Leo's number. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She called again, and again, and again. 15 times, each call ending with the same cold recording. She switched to messaging, typing a long, tear-stained apology. Leo, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But you need to know that Ethan tricked me. He sent me a text admitting he planned everything tonight, the fight, the slap, all to break us up. I was blind. I was so stupid. Please, just give me a chance to explain. I'll cut him off forever. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. Farce? The message was marked as read within seconds, but no reply came. She tried Ethan next. The call was rejected instantly, and when she attempted to text him, she saw the red exclamation mark. He had blocked her. The bastard had used her and discarded her, and now he had vanished, leaving her to reap the consequences of his scheme. Ivy sank back to the floor, her body racked with sobs. The empty banquet hall seemed to mock her, the wilting roses, the half-drunk glasses of champagne, the abandoned centerpieces. Everything Leo had so lovingly prepared now stood as a testament to her own stupidity. Her mother stayed with her for another hour, trying to console her, but nothing could penetrate the wall of guilt that had encased Ivy's heart. Eventually, Mrs. Sue helped her into the lounge, where Ivy lay on a sofa, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening like a broken record. She thought about the first time she had met Leo, how he had been so earnest and kind, how he had listened to her dreams without judgment. She thought about their wedding day, when he had promised to always be her safe harbor. She thought about all the small things he had done, the way he would heat her slippers by the radiator, the way he would leave sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with sweet messages, the way he would cancel plans to stay home with her when she felt low. And she thought about all the times she had chosen Ethan instead. The weekend trips she had taken with Ethan while Leo worked late. The conversations she had shared with Ethan over dinner, telling him things she never told her husband. The way she had defended Ethan's right to be in their lives, even when Leo had begged her to set boundaries. She had been so certain of her moral high ground, so convinced that Leo was being jealous and controlling, that their marriage could withstand any test of trust. But the test had been a trap, and she had failed spectacularly. The next morning, Ivy woke with a resolve that bordered on desperation. She would not let Leo slip away without a fight. She would prove to him, through actions, not words, that she had changed. Her first act was to purge Ethan from her life. She opened every app, every contact list, every shared folder, and deleted him completely. She blocked his number, his email, his social media accounts. Then she gathered every gift he had ever given her, a set of framed photographs, a hand-painted ceramic vase, a silk scarf, a pair of earrings, and stuffed them into a garbage bag. She carried the bag down to the dumpster behind the building and threw it in without looking back. The act felt cathartic, but it was only the beginning. She drove to the grocery store and bought ingredients for Leo's favorite dishes: tomato beef brisket, stir-fried greens, and a hearty congee he had always loved. She cooked with trembling hands, trying to recreate the flavors he had once praised. Then she packed everything into a thermal container and drove to the small apartment Leo had kept before their marriage, the one he had never sold, the one he had retreated to now. She waited in the building's lobby from 7 in the morning until noon. When Leo finally emerged from the elevator, she rushed toward him, holding out the container like an offering. "Leo, please, I made your favorite. Just give me 10 minutes, I'll tell you everything, about Ethan, about how blind I was, and I'll accept whatever you decide. I just need you to hear me." Leo stopped and looked at her, his expression unreadable. The red mark on his cheek had faded to a pale bruise, but it was still visible, a reminder of the violence she had inflicted. He didn't take the container. "I've already told you everything you need to know," he said, his voice calm and distant. "My lawyer is drafting the papers. You can review them and suggest changes through your own lawyer. There's no need for us to meet in person." "I know I don't deserve your time," Ivy pressed on, her voice cracking. "But I've already cut off Ethan completely. I've thrown away everything he gave me. I'll do anything to prove that I've changed. I'll take over all the domestic work. I'll care for our parents. I'll never make you feel second again. Just give me one chance." Leo shook his head. "You're missing the point, Ivy. This isn't just about Ethan. Even if he had never existed, our marriage was already broken. You spent years putting me last, dismissing my feelings, and expecting me to accept it without complaint. That's not love, that's exploitation. I've been exhausted for 7 years, and the slap was simply the wake-up call I needed to realize I can't do it anymore." He sidestepped her and walked toward the exit. Ivy stood frozen, the container growing cold in her hands. For the next week, she repeated her ritual, cooking meals and waiting for him outside his apartment, sending long text messages detailing her remorse, volunteering to handle his parents' care and her parents' appointments. She visited both families, kneeling before them and confessing her mistakes, begging them to intercede on her behalf. Mrs. Shen, Leo's mother, was visibly moved by Ivy's desperation, and she called Leo to plead for reconciliation. But Leo remained steadfast. In a calm, measured phone call with his mother, he explained, "Mum, I don't hate Ivy. I'm not bitter. But I'm done. I've been giving endlessly for years, and I have nothing left. A marriage can't be one-sided forever. This is the healthiest decision for both of us." When Ivy learned of his refusal, she collapsed into a deeper despair. She stopped eating properly, spent hours scrolling through their old photos, and would often sit in the dark living room, clutching a worn sweater that had once belonged to Leo. On the 7th day after the banquet, Ivy waited for him again in the rain. A cold autumn drizzle soaked through her coat as she stood outside his building from dusk until nightfall. When Leo finally appeared, he was holding an umbrella. He offered it to her silently. "Go home, Ivy. This isn't going to change my mind." She grabbed his wrist, her fingers cold and damp. "I know I hurt you. I'll never forgive myself. But please, just give me a year, 6 months, even a month, to prove I can be the wife you deserve. If I fail, I'll walk away forever." Leo gently freed his hand from her grasp. "You're not understanding what I'm saying. It's not about proof or time. It's about the fact that I've already spent 7 years waiting for you to value me, and that wait has cost me my peace. I'm not angry, I'm just empty. And emptiness can't be filled by more waiting." He stepped inside the building, and the door clicked shut behind him. Ivy stood in the downpour, the umbrella untouched at her feet, the rain mixing with her tears until she couldn't tell them apart. The morning of the divorce filing was grey and drizzly, the kind of day that seems to mourn with you even when you're ready to move on. The courthouse was quiet, a few somber couples scattered across the benches, clutching their own folders of dissolution. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black suit that felt more like a uniform than an outfit. I had slept well the night before, which surprised me. There was no anxiety, no second-guessing, just the calm certainty of a decision made after years of deliberation. Ivy was already waiting inside the entrance hall. She looked thinner, her cheekbones more pronounced, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. She wore the same champagne gown from the anniversary banquet, clean and pressed, as if she thought that wearing it might somehow transport us back to a time before everything fell apart. In her hands, she clutched a crumpled piece of cardstock, the anniversary card I had written for her, the one I'd thrown away. She had apparently rescued it from the trash and painstakingly taped the torn pieces back together. When I approached, she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Leo, before we go in, I just want to say one more time that I'll do whatever it takes. I've already agreed to all the asset divisions. I don't want your money. I just want you to reconsider, to give us a real chance, not a fake one." I looked at her, taking in the desperation in her posture, the raw vulnerability in her eyes. A part of me, the part that had loved her for 7 years, felt a twinge of sympathy. But sympathy wasn't enough to rebuild trust. "I appreciate what you're saying," I replied, keeping my tone gentle but detached. "But we've already been through this multiple times. The agreement is fair, and we've both signed off on it. Drawing this out will only hurt us more." She thrust the card toward me, her hands shaking. "You wrote this. You spent weeks on it. You said I was your greatest joy, that every memory with me was a treasure. How can you throw all of that away over one mistake?" I looked at the card, my own handwriting smudged where her tears had fallen. "Those words were true when I wrote them," I said quietly. "And they're still true, as memories. But memories don't make a marriage. A marriage requires 2 people who consistently choose each other every day in every situation. You chose Ethan, Ivy. You chose him for years. And on the night that should have been our celebration, you chose him so publicly that you humiliated me in front of everyone we know. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. There was nothing she could say that she hadn't already said. We walked into the hearing room together, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the proceedings. The clerk reviewed our documents, identification, marriage certificate, the notarized agreement, and asked us each the standard question. "Do you both enter into this divorce voluntarily, and do you understand that it will be legally binding?" I answered immediately, "Yes." Ivy paused. For a long, agonizing moment, she looked at me, her eyes pleading, as if she could will me to change my mind with sheer desperation. But I kept my face neutral, my gaze steady. Finally, she whispered, "Yes." The clerk had us sign the forms, 3 copies each. Ivy's hand trembled so violently that her signature was barely legible. When the red divorce certificates were printed and handed to us, she stared at hers as if it were a death warrant. We walked out of the courthouse together, side by side but worlds apart. The drizzle had turned into a steady rain, pattering against the pavement. We stood under the awning, the silence between us heavy. "Leo," Ivy said finally, her voice barely audible. "If you ever need anything, if your parents need help, if you ever change your mind, I'll be there. I'll always be there." I nodded, not unkindly. "Thank you. Take care of yourself, Ivy. I hope you find happiness, and I hope you learn to see when someone truly values you. Goodbye." I walked to my car and drove away, the rain streaking across my windshield like tears. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see her standing there, alone, in her crumpled gown, clutching that torn card. The months that followed the divorce were transformative for me. I had expected grief, loneliness, a period of aimless wandering. Instead, I felt a lightness that I hadn't experienced in years. Without the constant emotional labor of placating Ivy, without the anxiety of Ethan's intrusions, Without the endless negotiations over boundaries, I had time and energy to focus on what truly mattered. I threw myself back into my design studios with renewed passion. I landed a major contract to oversee the interiors of a new downtown high-rise, then another for a luxury hotel chain. My work was recognized in design publications, and I was invited to speak at conferences. The professional acclaim was gratifying, but more than that, I enjoyed the simple rhythm of my days, waking up without dread, going to work without baggage, coming home to a quiet apartment that was entirely my own. I reconnected with old friends, men I had neglected because I had been too busy managing Ivy's social calendar. We went hiking in the mountains. She did try to rebuild. She took over all the caregiving duties for both sets of parents, accompanying her mother to dialysis appointments, driving Leo's father to his physical therapy sessions. She cooked, cleaned, managed the household finances, all the tasks Leo had once done for her. The labor was exhausting, but it gave her a glimpse of the burden she had placed on him for 7 years. She began to understand, in a visceral way, how much he had sacrificed. She also made a concerted effort to avoid men altogether. She deleted all dating apps, stopped going to parties, and turned down invitations that might involve meeting new people. The very idea of intimacy repulsed her now. She associated it with manipulation, betrayal, and her own catastrophic judgment. But the worst moments came on anniversaries. Every year, on the date of their wedding, and on the date of that fateful banquet, Ivy would book a table at the same revolving restaurant, order the same champagne roses, and sit alone at the table where they had once sat together. She would spend the entire evening staring at the city lights, occasionally touching the glass where Leo might have touched it, and let the tears fall freely. She wrote letters to him, long, rambling apologies, but she never sent them. She knew he would not want to read them. Once, about 2 years after the divorce, Ivy attended a charity gala for a hospital foundation. She had been invited as a board member's +1, and she had dressed carefully, hoping to appear composed and professional. The ballroom was buzzing with conversations, the clink of champagne flutes, the rustle of expensive gowns. And then she saw him. Leo was standing near the stage, speaking with a group of investors. He looked healthier than she remembered, broader in the shoulders, more relaxed in his bearing, a genuine smile playing on his lips. He was wearing a well-fitted navy suit, and he gestured animatedly as he talked. When he laughed, the sound reached her across the room, and her heart stopped. She wanted to run to him, to throw herself at his feet, to beg for one more chance. But she held herself back. She had already seen his expression when he looked at her, polite, distant, as if she were a stranger he had met once at a party. When their eyes finally met across the ballroom, Leo gave a brief, courteous nod, a gesture that acknowledged her existence without inviting conversation. And then he turned back to his group, his attention already elsewhere. Ivy stood frozen, tears pricking at her eyes. She had become a ghost in his life, a shadow he had outgrown, and the worst part was that she knew it was exactly what she deserved. She left the gala early, slipped out through a side door, and drove aimlessly through the city streets until she found herself, inevitably, at the revolving restaurant. She went inside, asked for a table for one, and ordered the same champagne roses she had had on every anniversary since the divorce. She sat facing the empty seat, watching the sunset bleed into the cityscape, and she wept. The years stretched on. Ivy never remarried, never even dated. She became a recluse, known among her few remaining friends as the woman who had thrown away a perfect marriage for a con artist. She threw herself into charitable work, volunteering at hospitals and animal shelters, but no amount of good deeds could fill the void in her chest. She still sent Leo messages on special occasions, his birthday, Christmas, New Year's, brief notes wishing him well, never expecting a reply. Sometimes she would add a line about how much she regretted everything, how she would always love him, how she hoped he was happy. He never responded, and she understood. Some wounds are too deep for words to heal. One autumn evening, 5 years after the divorce, Ivy sat in her penthouse and looked out at the city lights. She had just turned 40. The mirror reflected a woman with fine lines around her eyes and a weariness that no amount of rest could erase. She picked up the taped-together anniversary card that she had saved from the trash, and she read Leo's handwriting again. "Ivy, my love, you are the heartbeat of my life. Every day with you is a gift I don't deserve. I promise to always be your shelter, your support, your safest home. Forever yours, Leo. Adriana." She pressed the card to her chest and sobbed, the sound muffled by the empty rooms. 7 years of love, wasted on a woman who had been too blind to see it. 7 years of devotion, discarded for a man who had never cared about anything but his own ego. Leo, meanwhile, had moved on. He had found a quiet contentment in his work, his friendships, his solitary mornings with coffee, and a good book. He had even started dating again, a warm, intelligent woman named Claire, who ran a small gallery. He was careful this time, deliberate, but he had learned to trust his instincts. Claire respected his boundaries, valued his time, and never made him feel like an afterthought. He thought about Ivy occasionally, not with bitterness, but with a detached sort of melancholy. He hoped she had found her way, that she had learned the lessons that her mistakes had taught her. But he no longer felt responsible for her happiness. That chapter had closed. And so they lived, two people who had once been everything to each other, now separated by a chasm of betrayal and regret. Leo walked forward into a future of his own making, while Ivy stood still, haunted by the ghost of a love she had destroyed. The lesson, if there was one, was simple. Love requires reciprocity. You cannot pour endlessly into a vessel that has a leak at the bottom. And when you finally choose to stop pouring, you must have the courage to walk away, even if the other person is only just realizing how much they lost. Because by the time they see the truth, the one who loved them may have already gone cold. I will continue the story from where I left off, adding new chapters that explore the years following the divorce, deepening the emotional arcs, and introducing new developments. 6 years had passed since the divorce, and Ivy Sue had become something of a recluse. The penthouse she once shared with Leo had been meticulously maintained, the same furniture, the same artwork, the same arrangement of cushions on the sofa. She had replaced nothing, moved nothing. It was a museum of a marriage that no longer existed, and she was its sole curator and prisoner. Her days had settled into a predictable rhythm, waking at dawn, brewing coffee that she never finished, driving to her mother's house to help with the morning medication, then returning to the penthouse to sit by the window and watch the river traffic. She had abandoned her painting, her social outings, even her occasional shopping sprees. The only activity that gave her any semblance of purpose was charity work. She volunteered at a women's shelter 3 times a week, organizing donations and listening to stories of abuse and survival. She found a strange comfort in helping women who had been betrayed by men, as if by doing so she could somehow atone for her own betrayal of Leo. But the guilt was a permanent resident in her chest. It woke her at 3 a.m. with a jolt of panic. It accompanied her through every meal. It whispered to her in the quiet moments when she tried to read or watch television. She had become an expert at compartmentalizing. She could smile at the shelter, laugh with the staff, even crack jokes during lunch. But the moment she was alone, the mask would slip, and she would be left with the raw, unvarnished memory of that night. The sting of her palm against Leo's cheek, the horror in his eyes, the way he had looked at her as if she were a stranger. She still sent him messages on his birthday and Christmas. Brief, careful notes that wished him well and never asked for anything in return. She never received a reply, and she had long stopped expecting one. But she sent them anyway, as a kind of penance, a reminder to herself that the wound was still there and that she deserved to feel its ache. One afternoon, in late autumn, Ivy received a call from an old college friend, a woman named Miranda, who had kept in touch over the years. Miranda's voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Ivy, I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but I thought you should know. Ethan Jiang, he's been arrested." Ivy's hand tightened around the phone. She hadn't heard that name in years, and yet it still sent a chill down her spine. Arrested? For what? Fraud, apparently. He's been running a scam, posing as a talent agent, taking money from aspiring models and photographers, promising them connections he never delivered. There's a whole investigation. It's all over the local news. I thought you'd want to know, given your history. Ivy sat down heavily on the edge of her bed, her mind racing. Ethan, the man she had sacrificed her marriage for, had been exposed as a common grifter. Not just a manipulative friend, but a criminal. The irony was so bitter that she almost laughed. She spent the rest of the day searching for news articles, reading through the details of his scheme. Dozens of victims had come forward, describing how Ethan had charmed them, promised them the world, and then vanished with their money. His modus operandi was chillingly familiar. He had played the part of the supportive confidant, the understanding mentor, the soulmate who truly got them, all while systematically draining their resources and their trust. And Ivy had fallen for it, just like all the others. The only difference was that she had lost not only money, but a husband who had loved her unconditionally. That night, she sat in the dark living room, staring at the framed wedding photo on the mantelpiece. Leo's face was young and earnest, his arm wrapped around her waist, his smile full of hope. She traced the glass with her finger, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as she had whispered 1,000 times before. "I'm so sorry, Leo." On the other side of the city, Leo Shen was living a life he had never dared to imagine during his years with Ivy. His design studios had expanded to 5 locations, and he had been featured in 2 international architecture magazines. His work was in demand, his schedule full, but he had learned to prioritize balance. He took weekends off, traveled for pleasure, and maintained a small but loyal circle of friends. The most significant change was Claire. They had been together for 3 years now, a relationship that had grown slowly, organically, without the intensity that had characterized his early romance with Ivy. Claire was a gallery owner with a sharp wit and a patient heart. She understood his need for space, his occasional reserve, and she never pushed him to talk about his past. But he had told her the whole story one night, over a bottle of wine, and she had listened without judgment. "You loved her," Claire had said simply. "That's not something to be ashamed of. You gave it everything you had. But love isn't a guarantee, it's a risk. And sometimes it doesn't work out." Leo had nodded, grateful for her matter-of-fact acceptance. She didn't try to fix him, didn't offer platitudes about moving on or finding the right person. She just let him be, and that was exactly what he needed. They had been living together for the past year in a loft apartment that Claire had helped him decorate. It was a bright, open space with large windows that faced east, catching the morning sun. Leo had filled it with plants, books, and the kinds of small, personal objects he had never been able to keep in his previous home. A vintage camera collection, a set of hand-thrown pottery, a signed print from a favorite artist. It felt like Asti's space. In a way, the penthouse had never felt like Ivy's. One crisp December evening, Claire came home with a bottle of champagne and a mischievous smile. She had just returned from a gallery opening in Paris, and she was full of stories about the artists she had met. But there was something else in her expression, a nervous energy that Leo recognized. "What's going on?" he asked, setting down his book. "You look like you're about to burst." Claire took a deep breath and pulled a small velvet box from her coat pocket. She opened it to reveal a simple gold band. Elegant, understated, perfect. "I know we haven't talked about this explicitly," she said, her voice slightly unsteady, "but I've been thinking about it for a while. I don't want to rush you, and I don't want to pressure you. But I love you, Leo. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning, and I want to grow old with you. So, I'm asking, will you marry me?" Leo stared at the ring, then at Claire's hopeful face. A wave of emotion washed over him, not the frantic, consuming passion he had once felt for Ivy, but something deeper and quieter. A sense of rightness, a feeling of being seen and accepted for who he truly was. He took the box from her hand, slipped the ring onto his own finger, just to see how it felt, and then took it off and placed it in Claire's palm. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. "Yes, absolutely yes." Claire let out a breath. She seemed to have been holding for days, and she threw her arms around him. They laughed and cried and drank the champagne, calling their families and friends, making plans for a small, intimate wedding in the spring. For Leo, the moment was not a triumph over his past, but a gentle letting go. He had finally, fully, released the weight of his first marriage. He had learned that love could be different, less dramatic, less consuming, but more sustaining. And he had found someone who valued him not for what he could provide, but for who he was. Ivy heard about Leo's engagement through a mutual friend. The news hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. She had always known, in some distant part of her mind, that he would move on. But knowing and experiencing were two different things. She spent 3 days in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping. She replayed their entire history in her head, the good years, the slow erosion, the final, catastrophic night. She wondered if Claire was kind, if she appreciated Leo's quiet gestures, if she understood how rare and precious his devotion was. She hoped, with all her heart, that Claire did. On the 4th day, Ivy made a decision. She would let go, truly let go. She would stop sending Leo messages on his birthday. She would stop visiting the revolving restaurant on their anniversaries. She would stop punishing herself with the memories of a life she had destroyed. It wouldn't be easy. The guilt would remain, she knew that, but she could learn to live with it, rather than drowning in it. She could honor the love she had lost by becoming a better person, not a perpetually grieving one. She started by decluttering the penthouse. It was a painful process. Every object held a memory, every corner held a ghost, but she worked methodically, room by room. She donated Leo's old clothes to charity, kept a few sentimental items in a box, and rearranged the furniture so that the space finally felt like hers. She even painted the living room a soft, warm green, a color she had always loved but had never dared to choose. She also began seeing a therapist, a calm, middle-aged woman named Dr. Patterson, who specialized in grief and trauma. In their sessions, Ivy talked about Ethan, about her blindness, about the self-righteousness that had led her to defend him against Leo. She talked about her mother's illness, her father's disappointment, the pressure she had felt to be loyal to a friend who had never deserved her loyalty. Dr. Patterson listened, asked thoughtful questions, and gently guided her toward a more compassionate understanding of her own mistakes. "You were manipulated," Dr. Patterson said one afternoon. "That doesn't excuse your actions, but it does explain them. You were vulnerable. You had unmet emotional needs that Ethan exploited. And Leo, as much as he loved you, couldn't meet those needs because he was so focused on providing for you materially. Neither of you was perfect. The tragedy is that you didn't see the manipulation until it was too late. Ivy nodded, wiping her eyes. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to stop letting it define me. I want to find a way to live with the regret without being consumed by it. That's a good start, Dr. Patterson said. Regret is a companion, not a cage. You can carry it with you and still move forward. Over the following months, Ivy made slow but steady progress. She resumed painting, not the polished, ambitious canvases she had once produced, but small, intimate sketches of flowers and landscapes. She reconnected with a few old friends who had drifted away, explaining, without going into too much painful detail, that she had been going through a difficult period. Most of them were understanding, though she could tell that some still judged her. She let them. She also sold the penthouse, a decision that felt like amputating a limb, but one that was necessary for her healing. She moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of the river, with a balcony that overlooked a park and a kitchen that was cozy rather than grand. It wasn't the life she had once imagined, but it was her life. One she had chosen, one she was learning to inhabit. Leo and Claire's wedding took place on a bright May morning in a garden venue on the outskirts of the city. It was a modest affair, fewer than 50 guests, mostly close friends and family. Leo's parents were there, beaming and tearful, and Ivy's mother had sent a warm note of congratulations, which Leo had received with quiet grace. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Claire wore a flowing ivory dress that caught the breeze, and Leo wore a light grey suit that matched the spring sky. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising not to be perfect partners, but to be present and honest with each other. After the service, as the guests mingled over canapés and champagne, Leo's mother pulled him aside. She looked at him with the kind of maternal pride that only mothers can express. "I'm so happy for you, Leo," she said. "You deserve this. You deserve to be happy." Leo smiled, but his mother saw a flicker of something else. A shadow, perhaps, or a distant memory. "Are you thinking about her?" she asked gently. Leo considered the question. "Not in the way you think," he said. "I don't regret my past with Ivy. It taught me what I want and what I don't want, but I'm not dwelling on it anymore. I'm here, now, with Claire, and that's where I want to be." His mother squeezed his hand. "Good, that's the right answer." Across the city, Ivy was sitting in her new apartment, looking out at the park below. She had known it was Leo's wedding day. She had seen the announcement in the paper, and she had braced herself for a storm of emotion. But what she felt surprised her, a quiet, melancholy peace. She had spent years punishing herself, years reliving the night of the anniversary banquet, years imagining what she could have done differently. But somewhere along the way, the sharp edges of the pain had dulled. She still missed Leo. She suspected she always would, but she had stopped wishing for a different past. The past was fixed. The only thing she could change was the future. She opened her sketchbook and began to draw, a branch of cherry blossoms, delicate and ephemeral. She would never be the same person she was before the divorce. She would always carry the weight of her mistakes. But she could also carry the hope that she had learned from them. And perhaps, in some quiet way, that was enough. A year later, Leo and Claire were expecting their first child. The news had filled Leo with a joy he hadn't known he was capable of feeling, a primal, protective love that made him want to build a safe world for this new life. He worked hard, but made sure to come home early, rubbing Claire's feet and reading aloud from baby name books. Claire teased him about his newfound domesticity, but she loved the way he doted on her. Their relationship was far from perfect. They had arguments about household chores, about travel plans, about which school district to buy into. but they approached every disagreement with the same fundamental principle: we are on the same team. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Claire asked, "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you'd stayed with Ivy?" Leo took a moment to answer. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Not with longing, more like curiosity. I wonder if she's happy, if she's found peace. But I don't wonder if I made the wrong choice. I know I didn't." Claire nodded, satisfied. "I'm glad, because I don't wonder either." Ivy, in her own small apartment, had also found a measure of contentment. She had started teaching an introductory painting class at a community center, and she found unexpected joy in watching her students discover their own creativity. She had made a few new friends, people who knew nothing of her past, who saw her only as the patient, slightly solemn woman with a gift for color. She still thought about Leo. She still sent him a silent wish on his birthday. But she no longer carried the guilt like a stone in her chest. She had accepted that she could not undo the past, and that the only meaningful thing she could do was to live better in the present. On a rainy October afternoon, Ivy was walking home from the community center when she saw a figure on the other side of the street, a tall man in a dark coat, holding an umbrella, accompanied by a pregnant woman with a radiant smile. Ivy's heart stopped. It was Leo. He was crossing the street toward her, clearly heading to the same corner. Their eyes met. For a brief, suspended moment, they were both frozen in recognition. Then Leo nodded, a small, polite gesture, and Claire smiled warmly, having no idea of the history between the two people she had just passed. Ivy managed a small nod in return, and then she continued walking. She did not look back. Neither did he. And that, Ivy realized, was the truest form of closure. Not a grand reconciliation, not a tearful apology accepted, but a simple crossing of paths where both of them acknowledged the other without stopping. They had shared a past, but they no longer shared a future. And that was exactly as it should be. That night, Ivy sat at her desk and wrote a letter, a final, unsent letter to Leo, summing up everything she had learned in the years since their divorce. Leo, Astal. I don't expect you to read this, and I know you'll never reply, but I need to say it anyway. Asda. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything, about Ethan, about you, about what love should look like. I was so caught up in my own idea of loyalty that I forgot that loyalty starts at home. I forgot that the person who woke up beside me every morning, who paid my bills and held my hand when I was scared, was the one who deserved my fiercest protection. Instead, I gave that protection to a man who never deserved it, and I destroyed the one thing that mattered most. I used to think that if I could just apologize enough, if I could just prove how much I had changed, you would come back. But I understand now that some things can't be fixed. The damage is permanent, and the only way forward is not to repair, but to accept. I accept that I lost you. I accept that I will always be sorry. And I accept that my life will never be what it could have been. But I also accept that I can still be a good person, not to earn your forgiveness, but to honor the memory of the love you gave me. I will try to be kind. I will try to be honest. I will try to see the value in the people who choose me, and to never again take them for granted. I hope you are happy, Leo. I hope Claire brings you all the peace and laughter that I failed to bring. I hope your children are brave and kind, and that you teach them to be better than I ever was. Thank you for the 7 years you gave me. They were the best of my life, and the worst, because I ruined them. But I am grateful for them, nonetheless. Asda. Goodbye, Taska. Ivy, Ote. She folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote, "For Leo" on the front. Then she placed it in a drawer, where it would stay, unread, a testament to a love she had lost and a life she had learned to live with. The rain had stopped outside, and a sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds. Ivy turned off her desk lamp and went to bed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She did not sleep, but she rested, and that, for her, was enough.